I'm Indra,
And I'm Amanda.
and we'd like to welcome you to The Messy Middle Matters.
Hey, Indra, how are you?
I'm good, Amanda. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited about today's topic.
So am I. It's it's a juicy, or like it's juicy, and I have lots of feelings. I have lots of feelings. Some of those feelings are big feelings. I'm sure other people have big feelings about this big word too. Imposter syndrome.
Impostor syndrome. That is today's topic.
And just to make sure we level set, like one of our commitments that we've shared with everyone is that we want to make sure that we're as transparent and glossary and terminology as possible. So actually, rewind, Indra. We want to make sure that everyone is aligned on their understanding of certain words and phrases. And so we'll be defining them in our episodes, and we have a glossary up on our website, themessymiddle.com. You can scroll, you can find the glossary over there too. So Amanda, why don't you tell us about what feels like a word of the day? I don't know if we'll have a word of the day every day, but today we got a word of the day: imposter syndrome.
We do have a word of the day. So the definition of imposter syndrome, for those who may not know, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Indra,
Yeah.
when you hear the words imposter syndrome, what comes to mind?
So I had to look this up. I had to figure out exactly when this had happened. But when I first heard imposter syndrome, it was circa 2008, I think, is when it became popular in the vernacular. Started being in Harvard Business Review, HBR. We'll add that terminology, that acronym to the glossary, because I know I'll say it from time to time. It was the first time that it came out. And when I first heard that term, I loved it because it gave language, it gave voice to something that I was feeling, that so many other people were feeling, but we just didn't know how to language it, right? And we didn't know how to talk about it. So it was great. It was great. Fast forward to today, and I think that the term has been weaponized. It's and I've given it a lot of thought in the past couple of days as I've been prepping for recording this episode. And what I realized is the context that this term usually shows up in is usually when there's some sort of power dynamic. And it's usually when I'm getting feedback. I'm getting feedback from someone who has either literal power or societal power or whatever power. I'm like, that's when like the idea of it can show up. And it's really funny. Okay, so again, I've been prepping and found a research study. The first time that I'm seeing this, and I'm not a researcher, but according to Google, the first time that I could find it, I found a paper from 1978 titled "The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women: Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention."
Oh, that's a lot of words that are scary.
It's a lot of scary words, but like, I was just like, oh goodness gracious. Like, it's so funny how whenever I find something that's older that echoes something that I've been feeling, or, amplifies something that I'm feeling. I don't know which one this one is. I'm like, oh, it must be onto something. And so like for me, like, and the fact that we call it a syndrome, like it makes it feel like you're sick with something, like you've got some affliction. Like that's not it. I don't know, Amanda.
No.
What do you think?
Yeah, you said syndrome, and the word syndrome is giving, or imposter syndrome, and calling it a syndrome, it's giving hysteria.
Word.
And I don't like it.
No.
And actually, prepping for this episode, I've had imposter syndrome like in the back of my mind a lot. And I heard in the last, I want to say week, 3 different people have said, yeah, I'm feeling really imposter. Like I'm feeling a feeling of an imposter syndrome, or like I'm feeling like an imposter. And I think imposter syndrome, the term imposter syndrome is way overused, and I'm not sure why. I think part of it is it actually is imposter syndrome, regardless of the word syndrome. But I wonder how much of it is it's something else. Something else
Right.
completely that we're just calling imposter syndrome, or we think this is what imposter syndrome is.
100%. Like, you know, when you sit down and you sit with the thought of imposter syndrome, whether you're literally experiencing it at a moment or you're thinking back at it or whatever it might be, it's really a collection of feelings. It's really just a collection of feelings of often of not enoughness, right? Or, feeling like you're faking it till you make it. Like, and I don't think we have these feelings in all sorts of different parts of our life. But when we talk about work, suddenly it gets labeled imposter syndrome. Like, what in the nonsense is that?
Yeah. I know I mentioned pottery
Yeah.
in episode 2.
Two, probably. Yeah.
But I'm gonna mention it again because I
Do
had
it.
my pottery class yesterday, and someone in my class said, I'm feeling real imposter syndrome about this because like pottery is hard. Pottery is really hard, and you have to just keep doing it and keep practicing in order to get it. And there is that feeling of like, I'm not doing this right, or I can't do this, or like, what is there something wrong with me because I'm just not getting it? And I don't think that's imposter syndrome. There's no fear of being found out as an imposter, which is, I think, why it's called imposter syndrome. It's that fear of being found out to be a fraud, to be an imposter. And it's like, what are we trying to fraud or imposter here in a pottery class? It's just a feeling of, doubting our own abilities because we're doing something new.
100%. And we've talked about this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. And I'll try and add it maybe in the show notes or somewhere. There's that one article, and I misquote it every single time. It's the New York Times article where it's like, I think it's an opinion piece where somebody said you should always be doing something that you stink at, you know. And in their example, it's surfing. Both you and I enjoy stinking at surfing. I think you're better at it than I am, but because you've done it much more recently than I have. But like, it's good to do things that you're not perfect at. I think there's too much of an addiction of perfection, in our society these days. So I love the fact that you're like you're doing your pottery, and you're like, it's a fun place to just have fun, stink, and try something new, and then get better, not stink forever. Like, you want to. What do I like to say? Make new mistakes every single day.
Yeah, I think we can do a whole episode on the link between, quote, imposter syndrome and perfectionism.
Probably.
Because I think they're linked.
I think you're right. But like, you and I had a really early on in our relationship, like, so just to bring everybody up to speed who hasn't listened to the past episodes, like, Amanda and I used to work together, and in the organization, I was more senior. I was the most senior woman in the engineering team. We can talk about that a little bit. That might be a topic somewhere for the future. How a woman who hasn't coded many days in her life. I've coded, but not, um, is the most senior woman in engineering. But Amanda, you came to me and you said, hey, I've been chatting with a lot of women across the organization, different levels, different life experiences, different, even different skill sets and crafts, right? And you said, I think we need to talk about imposter syndrome. So why don't you take us, and I was like, okay, sure. I'm the senior woman. I can create the safe space. Let's talk about it. So, yeah, tell me more about that example of like when you came to me, because you lived it. Like, that's my summary from my side. I didn't, like, you're you're so good at networking. Like, you're so good at staying connected with people.
Yeah, I was in the fray. I'm not sure that I came with you with we need to talk about imposter syndrome, but I am certain I came to you with some flavor of, I've been talking to the women in engineering, and I think we need to create like a women in engineering employee resource group, right?
Yeah.
An ERG. We just need a safe space to talk about things that women have to deal with in the workplace that maybe men do not. And then so I think we contacted all of the women and we were like, hey, would you be interested? Like, no pressure. Yeah. Would you be interested in meeting in some cadence as a group to talk about things? And I think most, if not all, the women in engineering were like, yes.
we had like 90% attendance, or like it was, like you said, it was an optional activity. Yeah.
Right. It was optional. And I think that first meeting was when everyone was like, can we talk about imposter syndrome?
Maybe that's when it came up. Your memory might be better than mine. Yeah.
Like, can we? And I think just the resounding voices in the virtual room of just like, yes, we need to talk about this. I'm feeling it. Can we do something about this? And it was really cool because one, we established that this wasn't going to be a women's group where all we did was complain about the men. And two,
no one needs that. Like,
no,
really, no one needs that. It's not healthy. It's not useful. No one needs that.
No. And two, like, we were willing to talk about the issue and put in the work. Because once this topic was brought up, we were like, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And there was a brainstorming session and we talked about our feelings a little bit. Like, why are we feeling imposter syndrome? Why do we feel like we're not, why do we feel all this self-doubt? Why do we feel like we don't belong? Why? And a lot of the feedback or a lot of the ideas were around, I'm doing a lot of the digital paperwork, the networking, the keeping the team together, the just being the adult in the room. And like, why am I not getting recognition for it? Like, I feel like I'm doing so much, yet at the same time, I feel like I'm not doing enough.
Right. And I think that's where, so for what I love about this, and it was one day where we just like all these light bulbs went off for each of us in different ways. And what made this conversation so fruitful, I think, has to do with the fact that it was a conversation of women in different career stages, women looking at things from different perspectives. And you could swap in the word people if you really wanted to. This happened to be women because, this was the dynamic and this was the sub community that needed the most service, or needed a forum. And, what was really fun is, it was a brainstorming piece, right? I think everyone brainstormed. Like you said, we found these affinity things. And me coming from my life experience, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun? Because the thing that happens with this type of work that you're talking about, Amanda, is it's so valuable, right? It's so important and it's so valuable, but it is never rewarded. If it's rewarded with here's a fancy sweatshirt, or here's a prize, or here's $500. But like when it comes to review time and to, promotion time, oh, no, that's not in our career ladder. You don't get to get promoted over that. Like, you're the most important person, part of our team, keeping this all together. I'm not going to say that out loud, but if you weren't there, I will say, if you weren't there, this wouldn't have happened. But I'm so sorry, because you were doing all these other things, you couldn't meet the criteria of what was happening, like what would get you promoted. So stay in your place. And just to be very clear, like, the folks that we worked with within this particular organization, a lovely, lovely bunch of individuals, right? So like, I don't want to, this is not some sort of slamming session, it's just the friction that can happen within an organization, because I think that women naturally will look to see what's needed to get done. Let me just do it. Right. I just think that that's in our thing. And because I was coming at it from hearing from it with the life experience that I've had, I was like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be fun to see if we could turn this into some sort of career ladder where it's actually measurable? Because the reason that women don't get, or people, but the reason that people don't get promoted for doing this kind of work is that. So, but we'll
It's
talk
not
about that.
explicitly, it's not explicitly called out in your job responsibilities on the career ladder.
Right.
And that is what is being used to as a rubric to measure whether or not you get that promotion.
100%. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more in our next episode, because that's a whole that we're going to talk about. But the reality is that through this arc of this first conversation, it was resound. It felt like a chorus of imposter syndrome. I like that. Like both of us heard the thing. We just attributed to different part. Yours is probably more accurate, but I'm like, it just felt like everybody was saying imposter syndrome. And by the end of this, it was literally an hour. By the end of this hour, this collection of people saw that it wasn't imposter syndrome. It was meaningful work. It was not getting rewarded. And oh my goodness, because of the collection of people that we have, because I knew that our penultimate boss would, like, if we could pull this together, we could actually execute against this. Like, because Pascal's amazing. Like, I adore Pascal. And I knew he would be, like, he's always been a champion he's always been a champion. He's a wonderful human. So we knew we could put this, I knew we could put this into practice, this thing that didn't exist yet, but like having this arc of like not enoughness, imposter syndrome. Oh my gosh, it's not imposter syndrome. Like that's just a label that gets slapped on these things whenever I feel these feelings at work.
Back to what we talked about at the top of this episode of just
right.
like, is it imposter syndrome or is it something else? And we realized, I think it's something else.
It's not. It's my work is not being valued. Like I said, that'll be our next conversation. But that, I'm gonna loop back to what I said earlier. If I look back at my career and like my lowest moments are when I'm getting feedback from someone of power who's telling me that I'm not doing it right. And the reality might be is that I'm doing it differently. Or the way that they do it may not work for me, but like the fact that I can't do it the way that I'm supposed to, and I'm putting that in air quotes, right? You start to feel like, oh my God, like, do I even belong here? like, do I even belong? Like, why did they hire me? What's going on? Like,
oh, totally. And this is why we started this podcast, right? And, just reiterating that nothing against this organization we work for. It was just a shining a light on this very real issue that was happening at our organization and at many organizations.
Everywhere. I'm close to saying everywhere. I don't mean it. I think that I would be shocked if, I would be shocked to find an organization where there wasn't something, because we do live in a world and in a country where there have been certain power dynamics for centuries that seep into the workplace. So that's why I'm going to say some of them might do it a lot better than others and might not have the challenges. And we were so lucky to be in a place where we could explore this and really bring light to it. Bring light to it and find a solution that we could implement. So,
do we want to tease the solution?
I don't know. I think it's a slippery slope. I don't know if I'll be able to hold myself back.
I know. I think it's not just a whole other episode. I think it's a series of episodes.
It probably is. It probably is. We'll start off with one. We'll give everybody like a little bit of glimpse into the solution for this. But I think that for anyone listening, really do sit there and think. My recommendation for whatever this is worth, if you're receptive to it, is whenever you feel this imposter syndrome, just sit with it, and which is hard. So I'm not as simple as not easy, right? Just to be very clear. Sit with it. Think about, like, is this me or is this them? Right? Is this the situation that I'm finding myself in? And is this the label that they give to these feelings in this situation? Because, as we were talking about, so Amanda and I, the podcast, we announced that the podcast was live. Like we did a hard launch yesterday. So from this recording date, right? So just so everyone knows where we're at. And before that, there was a lot of kicking the tires and, sorting some other stuff out. But we hard launched yesterday and, getting the podcast out the door and then receiving all the feedback from people. Most of it's been exceptional. So thank you, everyone who's given us really good feedback. I mean, even the ones who've given us stuff, constructive criticism, it's been really, really positive. But like that feeling, like, this is the first time we're doing something like this. I mean, like you could have imposter syndrome a lot, or you could sit there and be like, no, this is the first time that I'm doing this. And anyone who's figuring out how to mix audio for the first time in their life will feel like this because these tools are convoluted as anything.
I know it felt like such a meta moment. The realization of just like, Indra, I'm feeling imposter syndrome right now. Like, what are we doing? Who's going to listen to us? Like, who do we think we are, Indra?
And we are Indra and Amanda and Indra, two fantastic women who have experience to share with the world.
Right. But like fighting through this messy middle of 100%. Learning new tools, learning how to do this thing. Just the world of podcast in general.
Microphone placement. I made Amanda record. So as I'm mixing, I'm like, I wasn't in love with my voice for the first 2 episodes, whatever, big surprise. Who is? But I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so I started messing with my audio for the intro. And then I started messing with, I'm like, Amanda, record it like it's keep the microphone like it's an ice cream cone, which is advice I got years ago. So like, yeah.
This is as close as I'm gonna get, and this feels really awkward. But yes, I am.
You sound very
NPR right now, like an ice cream cone.
It's very NPR when you do that.
I know.
I feel like a delicious dish. Okay,
but yeah, it's so to come back to the advice that you were giving, Indra, of just saying, whenever you feel what you think is imposter syndrome, just sitting with it and really thinking about it and thinking if it is imposter syndrome or is it something else? Is it a more systemic issue like we realized, with that women in engineering group? Or is it just self-doubt because doing something new is uncomfortable?
100%. I think that's the perfect place for us to end. So, Amanda, thank you again for taking the time to do this podcast with me. I'm so excited. For anyone listening, you can find we have all of our information up on the website, themessymiddlematters.com. If you want to give us feedback on the episode, themessymiddlematters.com/feedback. We have a Google form where you can give us anonymous feedback. We're on all networks. We've got our YouTube channel up and everything. So please do share. I mean, share your feedback, because this is not about, as much fun as we're having, it's not about us. It's really about how we can help others. And that's really what this is all about. So please join us next time when we discuss how we transition from shifting from that feeling of imposter syndrome to it's something else, to making it actionable and measurable. So see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.